Hello, this video will be going over the topics that we are covering in Week 2, August 27th through 31st. Unit 1, Exponents and Radicals. I'll be putting this video link here on Google Classroom, and it's also on YouTube. And basically we're covering some new things in exponents that you have not learned previously. Probably have not learned previously anyways. So previously you've learned things such as 3 to the 0 is 1, 3 to the first power, this is 1 times 3, which is 3, and 3 to the second power, this is 1 times 3 times 3, and 3 times 3 is 9, times 1 is 9. And you keep going, so it goes 1, 3, 9, 27, 81, 243, etc. But there's a lot more that we can do with exponents than just this. And so we're going to be talking about, on Monday, the product and quotient rules. This is how we multiply and divide powers. And then we'll be talking about powers of powers and rational exponents as well, or fractional exponents. So for the product rule, this is, and let's go ahead and back this up into variables. So if we have a to the 0th power, this is 1 times no a's, so it's just 1. A to the first power, anything to the first power is itself, so 1 times a, which is a. A to the second power, we're going to have 1 times a times a. Okay. And then so on. So a to the third would be 1 times a times a times a, etc. So if we have a, and if we just think about this example right here, anytime we see a number or a letter, we don't usually write an exponent above it, but you can always think of it as having an exponent of 1. Anything to the first power is itself. So if we can think of it as always having a 1, then a squared is just, I'll leave out the 1 for now, a to the first power times a to the first power. So what happens when we multiply with the same base, very important, the same base, then we can add the exponents. So a to the first power times a to the first power equals a to the 1 plus 1 power, which is a to the second power. And this isn't anything that we haven't already seen. So, for example, with the 3 squared, we know that this is 3 times 3. But remember, we can think of that as 3 to the first power times 3 to the first power, which is going to be 3 to the 1 plus 1 power, which is this 3 to the second power, which of course is 9. 3 times 3 is 9. And so I'm actually going to be encouraging you in class to do this for a while, at least until you get a more intuitive, kind of automatic comfort with this, to always put this 1 on top of any number that you don't already see in exponents. Okay? So that is the product rule. If we're multiplying the same base times the same base, we can add the exponents. And then think about what might you think that we would do in the case of division. If we're adding the exponents of multiplication, what might we do in dividing? Or perhaps you thought about subtraction. So if we get something like a squared divided by a, remember that we can break down a squared into our a times a times a. We've got a on the bottom. And remember, we're going to be putting this first power on top of everything. Okay. And now we can cancel out a and a. And that just becomes 1. So now we've got a times 1 over 1, which is just a. So our quotient rule for exponents is going to say that if we have the same base, again, same base, a and a, if we have the same base, then we can subtract. So a squared divided by a to the first power is just a to the 2 minus 1 power, which is a to the first power, which is just a. Okay, so this is the kind of abstract version with our variables. If we want to see it with numbers, we can plug in some numbers. I've been using 3s, let's use 4s. So if we have 4 squared divided by 4, we can think of this as 4 times 4 divided by 4. And so there's a couple ways we can go about doing this. One, we can go ahead and multiply the top, and we get 16 divided by 4, which will give us 4. Or we can simplify it before we multiply. So 4 is supposed to be times 4 divided by 4. 4 divided by 4 is just 1. So we're left with 4 over 1, which is 4. So 4 to the second power divided by 4. Remember, we want to put the 1 on top. This is the same as 4 to the second minus 1 power, which is 4 to the first power. And anything to the first power is just itself. So that is our quotient rule. Okay. And again, it has to have the same base. Okay, so a over a, 4 over 4. Okay. So if we had something like 4 squared over 5, this would not be 4. Okay, this would be 16/5. Same thing if we had a squared over b. Okay, we cannot, it needs to have the same base to apply these rules. I'm going to pause the video here and erase. Alright, so if when we're multiplying the same bases, we can add our exponents. And if we're dividing the same bases, we can subtract our exponents. Think about what we might do if we have an exponent to another exponent. Which operation do you think we might use? Well, for this, we're going to use multiplication. So if we have, and for this one can be a little bit more challenging, so we'll start with the numbers. So let's use 5. If we have 5 squared, okay, and then we want to put an exponent on our exponent, let's say squared again. Remember that we want to do PEMDAS, okay, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So our parentheses comes first. We've got 5 squared. So this is going to be 5 times 5. And 5 times 5 will be 25. And now we can do our exponents. We'll get 25 times 25, which that's going to be 625. Okay. So when we've got the exponents, we can do it a little bit shorter by multiplying the exponents. So 5 to the second power to the second power, and you could see it like this, but you'll probably see it like this with the parentheses. This is going to be equal to 5 to the 2 times 2 power. And 2 times 2 is 4, so this is going to be 5 to the fourth power, which is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. And 5 times 5, this was 25, times 5 times 5 was 25, and then 25 times 25 was our 625. So if we go to a variable, and let's see, we haven't used g, let's use g. So if we have g to the third power to the seventh power, this is going to be the same as g, and actually, so I can show you a visual, I'll go ahead and make that number a little bit smaller here. Let's make it 3. This is saying to take 3 g to the third powers, rather. Okay, so this is 3 groups of g to the third power, and multiplying them. So really this is g to the 3 times 3 power, which is g to the 9th. And if you use the product rule in this case, remember that if we're multiplying the same base, we can add these. So we get g to the 3 plus 3 plus 3, which is also g to the 9th. Okay? So that's going to be the powers of powers. And then for rational exponents, it's the exact same processes, but now we have some fractions in the mix, or decimals. Okay, but the mechanics are the same. So if we have something like a to the 1.5 times a to the 2. Remember that if you don't see an exponent, it's assumed that there's a 1. So write that 1 in. Okay. And we want to do parentheses first. There's nothing to actually do in the parentheses, so we want to do exponents next. So this will be a to the 1.5 times a. And when we have power to a power, we're going to multiply. So 1 times 2. Oops. So this is a to the 1.5 times a to the 1 times 2 is going to be 2. And now we have the same bases, so we can add our exponents. So it will be a to the 1.5 plus 2, which will give us a to the 3.5. And you can actually plug this into your calculator and it will work out. And we will get into the radicals and such on week 3, where we will explore how some of these things work. So if you have something like 8 to the 2/3, this means to take it to the second power and then take the cube root. So 8 to the second power would be 64, and then the cube root of that would be 4. So this would be 1/3, but 2/3 would be 16. Okay. So we'll get into more of that, and with the radical, this would be 8 to the second power to the cube root. Okay. And so I'm just giving you a preview of that. We'll actually cover that in week 3. All right. And once again, if you need any additional support, you can watch these videos multiple times, or you can check out the videos and exercises on Khan Academy. I've put one video and one exercise for each day. They generally have more than one video available, so if you need more than one, check those out. Or of course, you can always search for other resources as well. Khan Academy and myself are not your only resources that are available. All right, have a good day.